Hi everyone. Today we're going to be talking about two important actions that are in Design Space: weld, attach, and group. So they all kind of sound the same, but they all three have very different functions, and I will show you what to expect with each different action and some of the negatives of the actions. So we're going to go with weld first. So what weld does is it removes cut lines between objects or fonts or anything that's going to be overlapping. You can use weld for to eliminate cut lines in between. So this isn't going to cut as a triangle, a square, and a circle. If I was to weld them, it's going to cut as one full piece. It's not going to have these cut lines in between. So there won't be a full circle, there won't be a full square, and there won't be a full triangle. They're all going to meld or weld into each other, similar to a welding machine that you would use for metal. It's kind of melting the metal. And that's kind of what we're doing here. So 9 times out of 10, you're going to use this with cursive fonts. That's because the tails of the letters intersect with each other. They overlap each other. So we don't want it to cut in separate letters. We want it to cut in one smooth word. We don't want there to be a bunch of choppy letters. So what happens when we highlight every one of these, and the weld action is now under the combine menu down here at the bottom. So you're going to go to combine and you're going to go to weld. So they all change to the same color. So this is because this is now one object. It's not a triangle, a square, and a circle anymore. It is one object, which means it's going to be sent to one mat and get cut out of one piece of material. That is the reason that it all turns to one color. Now, if you wanted it yellow like the triangle was, you can just go right back up here and change it to yellow or purple or whatever you would like. But all of this is going to cut as one now because we have welded it. Now, one disadvantage of weld is that once you save this project and exit out and then come back to this project, you cannot undo this weld. It is permanent. You can't undo it. However, if you're still on the canvas, even if you have saved, you can undo the weld. Now, the negative thing about that is that if you've done a bunch of stuff between the time you weld and then the time you say, uh-oh, I need to unweld it, you're going to have to undo every single thing you've done back to this point. So if you see that you have welded and you don't want it welded, you can hit the back button right up here in the top left, and it is going to unweld it back to our shapes. Now, I will show you real quick that if you were to weld again, and let's say we're going to save this. So the project is saved. There's anything new on here, and you're going to hit the back button and it's going to unweld. So even if you have saved, you can still undo the weld as long as you haven't closed the project and reopened it. Now, like I said, you're going to have to undo everything back to the point of welding, so sometimes that's not going to help you regardless, because you're not going to want to undo all of what you've done to your project. So that is the reason we weld. So let's get rid of him. And now let's talk about attach. So attach is when you want things to stay in the same place when you go to the cut screen. So say we have all of these laid out exactly like we wanted them. We want this a little bit over here and we want this up here. Now, if we go, let me change all this to one color so you can see what I mean. So if we go to make it, you can see they're not in the spot where we put them. So you're going to have to cancel. You're going to have to go back. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to select everything and go right down here to attach. Now these 3 shapes are locked into position. If you go to the Make It screen, you can see they're exactly where we have them on the canvas. Now, a question a lot of people have is, why do they all change to the same color? Well, if they're all one color, or they're all separate colors, and you go down here to attach, you're going to see they change colors. Again, just like weld, even though they're not being combined into one shape, they're still being kept together. So that means it's going to go to the same mat with the same color material on it. So if you want these in the same position, this is all going to get cut out of separate material or one material. If you want it all in the same spot, it's going to be cut on, I mean, theoretically, it's going to be cut on one piece of material, which means it's going to be one color. So every time you attach, it is going to turn everything to the same color because you want it to stay together as it goes to cut. So like I said, theoretically, that's usually one color material. You could, you know, put a little scrap of blue up here and a little scrap of red down here, but that's a different topic for a different day. So when you attach, they all stay together, or they all change to the same color, but they stay together exactly where you have put them. So let's get rid of these. And so the last function that we're going to go over is grouping. So grouping is the only action as far as weld and attach goes that has nothing to do with how this project is going to look on the cut screen. Grouping is strictly to hold things together. So you select everything and your group button is right here. You're going to group them. You notice they don't change colors. That's because when you go to make it, they're all going to be on their individual mats because grouping has no effect on any of your project when you leave the canvas and you go to this screen, which is the cut screen. It doesn't have anything to do with it. So what group is usually used for is, number one, you can group like if you had a bunch of shapes, you can group them all together. So then you can hide them together and you can unhide them together, just so you don't have to go and individually do that. Also, if you group, you can size them together. So we can make them all smaller, we can make them all bigger without having to do it individually. And you can move everything around on your screen without having to, or on your canvas, without having to worry about one of the pieces getting left behind or not moving along with the rest. So that is why we group. It's a really handy tool, especially when resizing, because you're going to be able to keep everything together and resize everything together. So, but just remember that when you go to the cut screen and leave the canvas, it has no effect. Everything is still individual, and that's why everything stays the same color when you group, because it will still be cut or sent to separate mats, which are going to be separate colors, excuse me. So that's group. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else that you need to know about those three. I mean, there are different reasons to use all of them, but one thing I did want to mention, since we're talking about all three of them, is there's really never usually a reason to stack actions. So what I mean by that is there's really no reason to group and then attach, or group and then weld, especially with weld, because weld overrides everything. And like I said, when you close your project and come back to it, your weld is permanent. So whether you attached it before you welded or not is going to be irrelevant. It's going to be welded and there's not going to be anything you can do with it after that point. So there's really no reason to perform an action before weld. Weld is all that is needed. And so let's get these back to the same color, or to the different colors. So there's no, you can group before attaching, and that's just going to keep things together. So when you attach, if you go and detach, it's still going to be grouped. So you can do that if you would like, but there's no reason to group and then attach, or attach and then flatten, or group and then weld. There's no reason to stack actions. The same goes for flatten. We'll talk about flatten in another tutorial, but the same goes with flatten. There's no reason to attach prior to flattening or group prior to flattening, unless you just want to group them to keep them together in case you're going to unflatten and then move them around the canvas and you would like to keep them together. But as far as the three actions are concerned, weld, attach, and group, there's no reason you have to stack them. There's no reason that you have to perform one action before the next. You can, but there's just no need. And I see that mentioned a lot, and people say, well, you have to group, attach, and then weld. And like I said, weld's permanent, so it doesn't matter what you do prior to that. But again, if you want to do it, that's up to you, but it's not a necessity. Just grouping is going to work for grouping, just attaching is going to work, or just welding is going to work. So no need to perform more at one time. It's just more things to click, more time you take from your project. So I hope I've cleared some things up with weld, attach, and group. And I will be talking about contour, flattening, and slice in another video. And if you have any questions, just leave them below and I will get back to you. Thanks for watching.